So I feel like I'm the luckiest generation in the world because I got to watch the original trilogy before the prequel trilogy came out, but I was young enough to love the prequel trilogy. And get out of here, Junkman. I'm telling a story, okay?
My buddy X-Wing, a millennial, who thinks his generation is the best generation of Star Wars, or the best generation to grow up with Star Wars, because he got to watch it on video cassette tape, and then got to watch the prequel as a little lad. Well, I'm here to tell him he's not the best generation to grow up with Star Wars because I am Generation X. I grew up with the original Star Wars. So what does that mean? I got to go see Star Wars, just called Star Wars then, or some of you may call it New Hope. I got to see it in the theater. Of course, I was only 5 years old, but I still have a memory burnt in my head of me and my brother returning home that day and playing Star Wars outside. We didn't have any Star Wars toys, of course, at the time, so we had to make lightsabers out of sticks and somehow made a Han pistol out of a stick. Not saying it looked like it, but that's what we did. And I can remember getting all excited for The Empire Strikes Back. We got to see a new Star Wars. By this time, I was a little bit older and I could appreciate it a little bit more, you know. And not only that, I didn't mention it, I got to see Star Wars New Hope re-released almost every year. So, it was an exciting time. And after seeing Empire Strikes Back, I was left with one of the greatest movie cliffhangers of all time. I am your father. Bet you didn't get that good cliffhanger watching it on your video cassette tape where you could just pop in the next movie. No, we had to wait 3 years. You're just saying, well, that makes you the worst generation. That's awful. No, it was great. You would go to school the next day, debate it on the playground, debate it in the classroom, debate it on the school bus. Is Darth Vader lying? Some of us really thought he was. I can remember coming up with a theory saying, hey, Darth Vader said he would do anything to get Luke Skywalker to join him. That means he would even lie about the guy's daddy. And then I would change and be like, no, man, it's got to be his dad. But why would Obi-Wan lie? It would just blow your mind. Obi-Wan Kenobi lied to Luke Skywalker? Didn't make any sense to us. And we debated this back and forth for 3 years. And then, Return of the Jedi. I was like 10, 11 years old. Perfect time to see Return of the Jedi. That's why as a kid, I loved Return of the Jedi the best. That was the best movie. At least as a kid. You get a little older, you realize Empire Strikes Back is the better movie. It's darker, it's more fun, it's more exciting. It's got a hell of a great lightsaber fight scene. Not saying the other ones didn't. But growing up, Star Wars grew up there with the original era. And hey, we had the best toys. Sorry, X-Ring, I know you had some big bulky Star Wars toys in the 90s and you thought they were cool and you were putting your big bulky Star Wars figures and ships from the mold that we played with as kids. No, your generation might have had a good time seeing the prequels as a kid and watching your Star Wars on video cassette tape, but believe me, Generation X, you can't beat it. We were there for the original. We had the Kenner toys. We had the Kenner puzzles. We had bedroom sheets from the original Star Wars. We had pajamas from Star Wars. I had curtains. Star Wars damn curtains. I had them. Yes, I did. And then we did have to suffer through the dark times. And I had a set of Star Wars comic books, my EU. The EU I loved before the 90s decided to recon it and everything and then make people like X-Wing, make the millennials happy because now they got some books. Heir to the Empire is a great book. Dark Empire is a great comic series, don't get me wrong. But the Marvel ones, yeah, you know what was great about them? They were fun. Sometimes they were serious, sometimes they were serious, sometimes they were wacky, and they would lead into the new movie. Reading Marvel comics. There's Empire Strikes Back coming to the theater, and look, they're on their way to Hoth in the comic book. Oh, they're searching for they're searching for Han Solo and Carbonite in between them. They're leading us to Jabba. There it is in the comic. Where's our roadmap to the new movies? We got to watch the heroes unfold and journey to the next movie. Carry us to the next movie as we waited 3 years, and it was wonderful. We had video games. Maybe not the best video games, but we had the Star Wars Death Star arcade. That was awesome. We had a Return of the Jedi game. We had some great games. We had a lot of cool stuff, and Star Wars blew our mind. Now, you kids that grew up with Star Wars and VHS, go and see the prequel. You don't understand what it was like to go see Star Wars or fall in love with Star Wars when it was original. I know, you think you're the best generation to see it because you got to see it on video cassette tape. But it blew our mind. We'd never seen anything like this. Before we went to Star Wars, we went to a movie and saw stuff like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Saw a car flying in the air. You might have saw 2001 A Space Odyssey. My kids didn't care about that. It was boring as crap to kids. No, we had to watch the Apple Doubling Gang. We went to the movie, and you never seen special effects like you did in Star Wars. Never seen it. And by the time the millennials got their VHS cassette tapes, getting ready for the prequels, they already seen all these special effects. They saw Jurassic Park already on the big screen. They have already seen Terminator 2. They wasn't blown away by special effects. Not like we were. We would watch specials on TV. How did they do that? A whole special would come on network TV. And you remember when we just had to see any part of Star Wars we could? Oh, they're going to talk about Star Wars on the news. So let's watch it. So I could see a little hint of a Star Wars clip. It would just blow your mind away. It would just make your day. I'm going to watch the making of Star Wars on CBS tonight because they're going to show clips from the movie. I can see clips from the movie in my house. Yeah, I had a little Kenner film projector, not film projector, a little piece of plastic, put a cartridge in, you spin it around with your hand. You could watch the movie on crappy black and white through a little eye hole, and it was like Netflix in HD. We loved it. It was a great time to grow up Star Wars. I know you grew up with Star Wars with the prequels. Yeah, you like that. I'm not bashing the prequels. I've come to love that time period for Star Wars. I don't love the movies. I like them. I don't bash on them. I didn't even bash on them then. I thought bad about them sometime, but they let me down. Now, we did have the dark times. The dark times, which I would say roughly 1983 after Return of the Jedi to about 1990. I like to say 85 to 95 because 85 is when the toys ended and they came back. But really, late 80s, early 90s, before Heir to the Empire and Dark Empire, we had a dark time. You couldn't even walk into a store and see anything Star Wars. You walk into a store and guess what? There's no Star Wars there. You go down now every aisle's got something with Star Wars on it. But yeah, you couldn't walk into a store and see Star Wars. I can remember finding out that a media play about an hour away from my house had Star Wars merchandise. They had a Star Wars hat. Somebody told me some other Star Wars stuff, and I couldn't believe it. This is probably 91, 92, and I had to get in my car. I had this ugly green Mercury Marquis that I knew wouldn't make it there and back, but I didn't care. Star Wars merchandise in a store? I couldn't believe it. It blew my mind. So I drove all the way there. I bought me a Star Wars hat. I bought a Star Wars mug, and I think I got something else I don't remember. Blew my mind. And the car on the way back overheated and broke down on the side of the road about 20 minutes away from my house. But you know what? As I sat there and waited for that wrecker to come and get me and pick me up, I had my Star Wars hat on. I was happy. I had some Star Wars. I couldn't believe it. I can remember walking into a B. Dalton bookstore around 1981, seeing Star Wars on a magazine cover. They were doing kind of a special Star Wars issue, and it blew my mind because I couldn't believe I saw Star Wars at a store. I can remember seeing around the same time too that collectible book, Star Wars, Star Trek collectibles. Looking through that book, it was like magic. It was a magic time for Star Wars fans. You grew up in that original era. I cannot ever make a video explain it to you kids that would grow up after the release of the movie. It was unlike anything any kid experienced. I know my dad had got to experience Elvis. And some other dads got to experience the Beatles. And Star Wars, the original trilogy, for us, Generation X, that was our Beatles. That was our Elvis. It changed the world. It changed how movies were made. It changed how movies was marketed. It changed how movies looked. It changed everything. And then we had the Return of Star Wars with Heir to the Empire. I didn't read it, but I bought the cassette tape. Book on cassette, listened to it in the car over and over again. Dark Empire blew my mind. A Star Wars comic is coming back. I can remember getting, I think it was a Terminator comic on the back of the Dark Wars Terminator comic. They had an ad, coming soon. Star Wars was back in the comic books, and I would just stare at the ad all day. And then we had the return of the toys. It was really time to get hype. We had the collector market boom with all the kids that grew up with the old stuff and now in their 20s buying the old stuff again. It was a great time. And then finally, after 16 years of debating, talking about the prequels, guess what? We got them. We stood out there in line for hours. And there were people that standing in line for a whole year. At least, and a lot of them stood out for months. It was an event, something that doesn't happen anymore. Not because movies suck now, and they do, but that's not why. It's because now you can buy your ticket and your seat online, and there's no reason to get there early. But back then, you would sit in a tent and wait to see the Phantom Menace. And if we didn't like it, we didn't care. We went to see it 5 or 6 times. We didn't get angry. We didn't fight and fuss at other fans. We embraced fans that loved it. We say, I wish I loved it more, but hey, it's Star Wars. Who cares? I'd rather watch a bad Star Wars than no Star Wars. I used to say that until I saw some of the later Star Wars stuff. But when was the best time to grow up Star Wars? Was it watching the original trilogy and then waiting 16 years for the prequels? And then falling in love with Star Wars all again? Star Wars is back. And merchandise everywhere you went. And I didn't even get into 1997 when we got to see the special edition on the big screen. And yes, it had a crappy looking Jabba the Hutt. And yes, it had the worst Jedi music I've ever heard. We didn't care. Star Wars was on the big screen. It was back. It never went away from 1997. And I know, you watched Star Wars for the first time on your pan and scan VHS on your little TV. And you saying that's a great time to be a Star Wars fan. I got to watch it on VHS, on pan and scan. And then I got to see a prequel when I was 8 years old. 99, I was about to hit 30. I had waited 16 years to see Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader, fight on top of a volcano. I say they fought above a river of lava, but we won't get into all that here. Although I was promised for 16 years I would see Darth Vader and Obi-Wan on a volcano fighting. Never got that.
Yes, you
Changed
did.
canon once again.
Yeah, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah, you did.
Yes, you did.
No, they were not on a volcano.
Yes, it's a
They
volcano.
were literally on a volcano planet.
Yeah,
What
that's
are you
not a
talking
volcano.
about?
That's not the edge of a volcano.
It was a volcano planet. It wasn't just a volcano. I thought there was going to be one volcano in space, and they was going to be fighting on that
That's
one
what I was
volcano
promised.
in space.
That's what George Lucas stole Starlight Magazine.
I
in
love you,
1982.
Junkman. I love you to
Oh
death.
my
man.
goodness.
I'm here to talk about the greatest time to be a Star Wars fan, or the lucky to grow up during the original trilogy release. It's nothing like it. I'm happy that you grew up watching on VHS and you pan and scan. Didn't even have letterbox probably. Although you could have bought letterbox in 1989 in a box set called widescreen, but a lot of you didn't buy it. But I sure did. Bought it at a record bar. Got excited. I couldn't believe it. I already had the movies on bootleg. I recorded it off HBO. But this was letterbox, and I watched it for the first time, and I saw stuff in the background I've never seen before. It blew my mind. It was like watching Star Wars for the first time, even if it was on a TV that was the size of a big cabinet that had drawers on it. I didn't care. I got to see Star Wars. Now, some of you got the Laserdisc, and that's awesome, too. But you grew up with Star Wars on your VHS cassette tape. You got to wait. Oh, I had to wait 2 years before I got to see the prequels. Well, what did you discuss between the prequels? What's going to happen to Anakin Skywalker? We know what's going to happen to him. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm glad you grew up with Star Wars. I'm glad you grew up with the prequels. But I hate to tell you, if you didn't grow up during the original trilogy era, you missed out, man. You missed out. And not only that, by the time the prequels came out, a lot of us had children. I had a daughter born that same year, a couple months before the movie, so I didn't get to take her to see The Phantom Menace. I did get to take her to see Revenge of the Sith. But that's another thing. We grew up with Star Wars, 77 to 83. It was great, right? And then, by the time the prequels came out, many of us was older, married, had our own kids. We could take our kids to see the movie that made us, that became part of our DNA. Took them to the movies, shared that experience with them. And we get to see it through their eyes and think, hey, the prequels aren't that bad. We overjudge everything. But the kids love it. That, at the end of the day, is what matters when it comes to Star Wars. It doesn't really matter if I love it. It's that the kids love it. The kids need something. But I guess I'm rambling here. And I was on a live stream with X-Wing, and he mentioned how his generation was so lucky, and I hear that a lot. I've seen it talked about online before, and it just I don't know. I guess it triggers me being a Gen Xer, because if you're not Gen X, you just don't really understand what awesome generation it is. And I guess it's a bubble. I guess everyone in their generation thinks that's the best generation. I'm sure the boomers say that was their best generation. The millennials say, man, I had the best generation. I get to grow up and watch Hannah Montana or whatever. But no, Generation X even sounds cool. The best time to be a Star Wars fan. Seeing those original trilogy movies in the theater. Well, let me know how I'm wrong in the comments below. Or agree with me.
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.